So this 35, the Andante here, is one of our slow lyrical pieces. This is actually one of my favorite pieces to teach because I think it's just a lovely melody. And I think this is one we can enjoy playing. Whenever you have these lyrical pieces, in this book, these are not generally folk songs or hymns or existing tunes, so you can kind of imbue them with whatever meaning you want to. And the first thing that I want to do is have a student just listen to this piece and think about what kind of a character is this? You know, who perhaps would sing this song? What are they saying? This beginning, do 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 do. Is this someone who's just been dumped and they're singing, "She's gone and will never return to me"? Or is this perhaps, the villain in your favorite movie, whatever, singing, "Now I will finally rule the world"? What are you saying here? And I think you can have some fun with this and just come up with your own idea. Is it a love song? Is it a lullaby? What is the song about? And then that's going to affect how you interpret it and how you want to sort of emphasize points in the phrase. If you want to put your own words to it, or maybe start with some of mine and jump off from there, feel free. I think a lot of students have found this helpful over the years. So as we go through this, the most important thing, I think, is great sound, because with all our music making on, any instrument, but especially on a brass instrument, one of the first things we have to get is good sound. From there, good response throughout the range, many other things will follow. So make sure you're taking a good breath. I might be thinking, to start myself, 1 and 2 and bum bum, so that I get a good full breath. On that third beat, you can take all 3 beats, but count yourself off and give yourself space to take a good, full, relaxed breath. We want good sound. Even though a lot of this is soft, it's marked piano in several places, don't ever let it get softer than a good sound. And the same goes with the loud. We have here quite a dynamic contrast from our piano sections to a couple places we come up to forte, and at the high points too. Don't let it get louder than a good, round, mellow sound, because this should be within the character of the piece. I think, you have a singing type of piece, it's not going to suddenly start screaming at you, at least not in this particular tune. So we have to think about balance within the dynamics. Good sound all the way through. The next thing that we have to think about is rhythm. And this piece is in 9/8. So we have a basic feel that we're in 3, kind of like, if you haven't done 9/8 before, it's kind of like if you think about 6/8. In 6/8, we don't usually think of it as in 6, we think of it as in 2. And we're putting the beat on the dotted quarter. Here it's the same. The dotted quarter gets the big beat, and there are 3 of them in each measure. So we're feeling this in 3. So we need to feel this pulse. Do, 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 do. That's the big beat. Now we also need to be aware of the subdivision. We need to be aware of do, 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 and so on. So we need to be aware of the 8th note and its constant motion, especially in the long notes. So what I'll have students do to begin with this is, starting very, very slowly, probably slower than performance tempo, is we're going to play subdivision within the long notes. So for instance, in this first dotted quarter note here, that's the value of 3 8th notes. So I'm actually going to tongue 3/8 notes playing this. So I'd be playing do 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 do, and so on. So you'll notice what I'm doing in the long notes is that I'm, for instance, for a quarter note, I'm going to tongue that as 2/8 notes. Do 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 do, and then I'm stopping there to give myself an 8th note, cutting an 8th note out of that note for the breath. And so this not only helps me to get a sense of the pulse and how that subdivision is going to work, it also helps give me a sense of phrasing, where I need to breathe within those long notes. This piece works fairly well in terms of breath and phrasing because you almost always end on a long note. So it's very easy to take a little bit out of that note to breathe, but you have to figure out the timing and make that work. So the timing and the sound are the biggest things that people are going to be looking for. You're listening to this in an audition setting, that sort of thing. There are a few high passages where we come up here. One thing that you can do where you come up approaching the G is first find that pitch, maybe play it an octave down. Find that pitch on the piano so that you're hearing it. You can play it on the mouthpiece. Try and find it clearly there. Often when we remove the horn, we take away a lot of the habits of tension that we get every time we pick up our instrument, as many of us suffer from. And so if you'll take these passages, as we're coming up to this, and play this very clearly on the mouthpiece, bring it back to the horn, and go back and forth, and try to make the horn feel as easy as you come up there as you can. If you're not already, I would definitely be using the B-flat side of the horn up in that range of the horn. The trigger fingers are usually going to respond much more clearly. The other thing you can do is, as we're approaching that G, for instance, to think here, ta, ti. Ta, 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 ti, ta, ta, ta. Or here, ta, ti. Now, if you use that change of vowel sound, not everybody likes that, but if you use a change of vowel sound, ta, e, for changing into the high range, remember the point of this is not to change the shape of the embouchure. What we're wanting to do is leave the corners solid and the teeth open, but we're raising the tongue so that we change the airway. That's what we want to happen if you use that. It's a change inside the oral cavity. And something to think about. Using that ta, ti can help sometimes in response in that high range. So those are a couple of things. Now the other thing is rhythmic. One here at the end is there's a tendency after we do all these 8th notes and we get to the long notes, the people want to rush through these last few measures. Be sure you're subdividing. Da da dee da da. And so some of this you may want to do, for instance, a lot of this with a metronome set on 8th notes. So the metronome is tapping. Da da. And you hear that happening in long notes even though you're playing it as written. Playing the subdivision yourself helps get that sense of the timing. And similarly, then you switch back and forth between having a metronome on 8th notes and having it set on the big beat so that you get used to feeling the piece both ways. You need to be aware of the pulse and the subdivision simultaneously. Now the other rhythmic element is this right here. And you'll notice here, this one beat is quite different than our other 8th note passages, because what happens everywhere else is you have straight 8th notes descending or jumping around, it depends on the passage, but here suddenly we have this dotted 8th 16th figure, and this is one that is often misplayed. People will just ignore this and sort of keep going with it as if it were triplets. So da 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 da. Where we approach that, what I'll often hear is da da da, and it's played the same as if it were even 8th notes. This is one that you could argue, well, maybe this is an error. I think it's purposeful. Let's assume that it's correct and practice it as written. So when you play that figure, if you think of this, if you imagine the 8th note gets the beat, so this is 1 to 3 is kind of how that feels. Da ta ta ta. Our straight 8th note is ta 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 ta, so this figure is ta 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 ta. It happens, you might say, on the and of 2, if you're thinking of the 8th note as the beat, or in this measure, you could say, if this is the 8th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, te 6, 7. if you want to count it that way. So if it feels as if you were, for instance, in a measure of 3/4, 1, take 3. It's right after where the second pulse, the second eighth note pulse would be. So if you carefully divide that out, ta 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 ta. And you may want to do this differently, do it articulated, different ways, and get the rhythm really solid. And then, of course, when you perform it, this is all slurred. Do, do, do. And so it's all connected. But sometimes to begin with, you can do it all articulated, however it works best to get the rhythm solid. And then we go on from there. So those are the biggest rhythmic points. Like I said, in the slow pieces like this, the sound is always first, as it is almost all the time. And the rhythm really is second. And it's often the rhythm in slow pieces more than in fast pieces that gets people. So take the time and subdivide it out. Play it with the metronome, set on those different possible subdivisions. Practice playing the subdivision yourself. Get a sense for how this 9/8 feel works. Another thing, just to get this in your ear, because it is in minor, and for young players we spend less time in minor mode, be sure that you start by playing your scales in the key. Get to know the key. So for this piece, play your G major scale. You move within that scale basically some. That's our key signature, what it looks like. Looks like your G major that you're familiar with. And then play your E major scale. That is a G major scale starting on E. And you play E from E, but in this key signature as it's written. So when you play that scale, then you get a sense of the motion that we're doing here. All of this moves back to E as our home tone. So once you're familiar with the key, then I think it helps us to hear things. You can also go through particular measures and just find it very carefully, find where it sits within that scale. What is it doing harmonically? And I think being familiar with that E minor scale will help this make a lot more sense. Okay, so we'll play this for you again, and you can follow along in the music.